people making predictions, and they honestly just don't know what they're doing, as well as none of us know what they're doing. Let's kick off there, Kristen. What do you think about that?
Yes. Let's get into why we are over. So this is a weekly episode for those that are joining for the first time. This is our first episode of the series. And we are starting this series of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've now got a vaccine. So we are in that mode of the pandemic, but we still have all of these industry veterans and people in our industry who want to make predictions about what's going to happen and how it's going to affect travel and where we're going to be in 6 months and in 9 months and in 10 months. And we don't have the answers.
And I think it's, yeah.
Today, but no one has those answers. You can't make those predictions.
I mean, I totally get it. It's natural to want safety and security. So we want to, glamour on to something, especially people who've been in the industry so long and our leaders in the industry who are trying really hard to guide us. But honestly, like especially when it first started, people were like, oh, that's okay. We've been through the 9/11 crisis. We know what that's like. We've had, the BP oil spill or the hurricane crisis. We know what that's like, or this is just the flu. And it's absolutely unprecedented. And I think it's really important for us to just be totally honest. Some of us did really great last year. Some of us pivoted really well. And I think that was definitely the word of the year was pivot. But I think it's important for us, don't you think, Kristen, to just confess that we don't know what we're doing. You don't know what you're doing. So what is the best moment for right now? And I think those were the real winners, right? Those were the hot pieces, the people who just came to that realization and were ready to make leaps in things that they may not have done before because it was too much of a risk. But right now, what do we have to lose but risk?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to set realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Do not want to feel at the end of 2021 like we all felt at the end of 2020, which was in a state of panic. I just want to get over this hump of the year. Let's get to the new year. At least it'll feel fresh. It may feel like we're still stuck in this, the same 2020 situation, but it's a new year. So we were all in that mode. If we are not realistic with where we are and where we might be, where we could be, and where no one knows where if we'll be there or not, if we're not realistic in that, we're setting ourselves up to be in that same mental boat at the end of the year. There's no positivity in trying to, be positive for the right now, knowing that in 6 or 8 months from now, we're going to be pulling our hair out because we've been planning for something that we can't predict. So it just feels like we've got to stay realistic in being honest and not trying to be the experts in the industry or relying on those experts who want to, make those predictions and we can't truly say what the industry is going to be and how we're going to be operating.
Yeah, I'm so over, and I don't know if you've seen this too. Speaking of so over, a lot of what I'm so over are these LinkedIn promises and how that happens. But this new title of COVID recovery expert, like, what the hell is that? How can anybody say that? Because we're not even in COVID recovery, and we're still trying to work out like what's opening up. And some people have been really good. So, what do you think about the people who've taken some real risks?
I think we're all taking real risks. I mean, some risks feel a little bit more unsafe.
This is true.
And some feel like they're forced risks, like we just don't have a choice kind of risks. I think we're all taking risks, and it's okay to take those risks, big and small. But it's also okay to have real conversations with people who also don't have a game plan and game plan together versus trying to talk with someone who claims to be a consultant on a post recovery or a vaccine tourism marketing strategy. When none of that makes sense. You cannot expert. You cannot strategize on the today when you don't know what's happening tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's a real interesting trend that's happening right now. Is people talking about vaccine tourism and all that kind of good stuff. And I think there's some real issues there. One, with not everybody having an appetite to even want to take a vaccine, and this whole safe destination thing and what that actually means. I think those are flashes and buzzwords in a pan that aren't really going to materialize. So what kind of advice would you give for a destination who's been running a safe destination campaign or is starting a vaccine tourism campaign?
Well, by the time you plan your vaccine tourism campaign, vaccine tourism won't be a thing. So that's a waste of time. I mean, there's already restrictions happening right now in Florida where they're making it so that if you are not a Florida resident, you're not getting a vaccine in Florida. So there are things that are happening today that are going to affect tomorrow. So things like that don't make true sense. I think saying the word safe. So if you've been marketing, if you're a DMO and you've been marketing over the last 6 months and you've been trying to use the words like safe, uncrowded, COVID, those types of pandemic related words that, that you use to try to describe your destination, that those are sort of the banned words from most platforms that allow you to market on those platforms. And safe is one of those words that is it's not a word that truly describes something in a generalized way. You can't say that your destination is safe because everyone's perception of safe is different. I might feel safe there and you might be talking to me, but my neighbor doesn't feel safe because her version of safe is different than mine.
Right. I think that all goes back to like our appetite for risk, right? So we all have different appetites for risk and how we perceive risk. So this goes back to, nobody knows really anything about that. So I think, what we've seen and kind of pushing to this on the things that people aren't talking about is what is some of those like pop culture pieces that is kind of going underground you don't see normally in your destination news or your hospitality news. I think a lot of great stories that people aren't talking about are coming through that. And I think one you and I just talked about on the phone earlier, which is normally how we do things. We have these great chats and then we're like, hey, we should record this. One of those things is really converging. And Kristen and I have been talking about pop culture and tourism for years, but we have a new resurgence of that with these and really do talk about with the pandemic and the trends of, this digital civilization, this streaming environment. So I think what you were talking about earlier was interesting about that.
About the hotels doing their thing.
Yeah.
So, we're all, it's funny because we are, the stay home movement has all forced us into if you weren't a binge watcher or a Netflix, addict or addicted to something true crime on Hulu, then you are now. Today you are. And so it's funny and it's really cool actually that a lot of the hotels are piggybacking off of the pop culture. So, the hotel in Lexington that has the Queen's Gambit themed room is really cool and fun because that's obviously a top, there's like these record setting Netflix shows today that, were record setting in December and January, like Bridgerton and the Queen's Gambit and a few other ones. And so hotels are finding ways to appeal to those guys. And I think what's really cool about it is that if I'm thinking about going to a hotel, which could be anywhere USA, it could be a Queen's Gambit type room or one of those, Renaissance era type rooms in the middle of a town who typically, only attracts, people looking for wineries or, you know what I'm saying? It could, isn't reflective of what's going on in the hotel. So
but tell me, because I want to go to the Tiger King themed room. Where's that? Where's that in the United States?
That could be anywhere. Like that doesn't have to be a room that sits in a hotel in the middle of Oklahoma because that's where the show took place. So it feels like you could still have this great experience in that hotel kind of destination or in that room, and it's not reflective of what's going on in the city, or whether that city, for instance, is completely opened up. Because we might be, and this is where a lot of DMOs are going with their staycations, it's okay to be like, I got to get out of this house. Like, I may not be ready to travel, but if I want to do a staycation and there's a really cool themed room at a hotel nearby, I might want to relocate from my bedroom to that room because it feels like I'm kind of quasi vacationing, and then it's pop culture-ish. So I could lay up, in my themed room and watch that show on Netflix. And it just feels different. Like, it just feels different. And I think that is something that a lot of hotels aren't really talking about. And I think it's because they worry with regard to competition and other destinations, and even hotels within the destination of, I don't want to lose my market share. I might have one themed room or two themed rooms, and I really got to keep those rooms filled. So, but it's becoming more, you're seeing it pop up more and more.
Oh yeah, and I think people aren't talking about it because they don't want someone else to steal their strategy, which is interesting topic to go back to, like what people don't want to talk about from the DMO, Destination Marketing Organization world, is what they don't want to talk about is that model has been so solidified and so best practiced. And I think that is a little out the window. I think, trying to copy what somebody else does is not true. I mean, let's just be honest here. It's not true to a specific destination nature. And if you're a tier 3 destination trying to do what a tier 1 destination has been doing all these times, it's just not going to work. And no one wants to really just stand up and talk about how that model has changed, and from your hotels, from your hospitality, but also from like, who is your customer? No one wants to really just confess, right? Who the customer is. The customer has completely changed. You may have been a heavy leisure market or a heavy meetings market before. That's changed, but I don't think that's even changed temporarily. Do you think that's really changed permanently?
Well, I mean, it's going to feel permanent because we're not going to truly be back into the norm is gone. Like, the norm is now going to be completely new. And so that's where this whole idea of we don't know what we don't know yet stems from. We can't truly say back to, because there will never be a back to. There will always be a pandemic that happened in 2020 that reset a lot of things. But I think the way that people think about a hotel in a destination is different. And the hotels in those destinations have had to get really creative and take risks they don't normally take. I mean, you're talking about a hotel initiating a really cool, fun, funky, creative idea and a marketing campaign, and sometimes with or without the help of the DMO or a larger marketing group or PR group or whatever, because they just have to do what they have to do with the resources they have.
Right.
And in some cases, these hotels are operating on a limited staff, multiple people who typically would be involved in something. It's now down to one or two people who are wearing multiple hats already. And just so you've had to do more with less. And so that is a risk. It's a risk on the creative side, and it's a risk on the resource side. But I mean, those are things that you have to do. And there, it's funny because a lot of the things I think that we've seen over the last few months that destinations have done and hotels have done, I think prior to 2020, they might have spent a little more time and second guessed and maybe kicked it down the road a little bit. But I think that we've become better with
the tri-curious.
Yeah, and more comfortable with the decisions. Sometimes you feel like, let me sit on this for a minute and chew on it a while and just
take it to a committee, like get everybody's opinion.
You just have to do what you have to do in these times and try new things. We're back in that kind of beta stage where we're all trying something and testing it in different ways, because we're talking to a different behavior.
Yeah, I kind of love that though, because I think that has been so void in the tourism industry, with the exception of a few people, especially entrepreneurial thinking, who want to do something new. I think what's been missing is that whole try curious, let's take some risk. This may work, it may fail horribly, but like here's what we can put out there to our people, to our personas, to things that really match up like that. And that really kind of leads into this whole, especially from a social media perspective. I think it's been really cool and interesting, and maybe not talked about as much, as how destination marketing organizations who are largely either government or nonprofit, pull bed tax, try to stay non-controversial in these things. And yesterday, I think Kristen and I were texting back and forth about how much we were giggling at all these Bernie memes and destinations.
Yes. Cause I'm like, finally, we're doing something fun and like just like quickly piggybacking. Like we didn't go like, you know, it was like boom and then boom and then boom. And then DMOs are like taking, you know, hints and you know, creative juices from other DMOs. And that's really fun to see. Like it's fun to see.
Yeah.
It's really cool because of course we're part of a lot of groups. And then we have the, you know, the our travel tribe group, and it feels like now our DMOs are collectively making decisions together. Like this is fun, you know, let's do it. And these could be two separate destinations on either side of the nation doing, you know, kind of just taking creative risks,
Yeah.
but collectively, and doing it in something that's, you know, more of a.
It's not even, I mean, things like that, jumping on that pop culture, it's not even political. I know those are things that obviously we have to avoid, but it's not even political. Like that's just a, you know, just a meme, just a whatever. And the question, you know, your city council or your board members may have are, you know, has this book room nights? But what it does is it builds this popular culture affinity to your brand. Like,
Yeah.
that's the other thing that DMOs got forced into that some really already embraced and did. But what no one's talking about is building that affinity to your target market, your personal connection to those people who are like, oh yeah, this is cool. They may not travel today, they may not travel tomorrow, but they're going to remember like this was something that has part of that. And I think that's again something that's really cropped up in 2020 and going into 2021 is really isolating branding versus advertising.
Yeah. And not everything that we do has your standard KPI. It's not a, you know, not every creative decision, especially when it comes to social in the right now,
Oh yeah.
always tied back to those KPIs that we were prior to COVID typically tracking and measuring to everything that we were executing on. It's, you do have to jump on the bandwagon sometimes and just let some of that creative flow, and just, you know, and get some engagement. And it's a bit of brand awareness. It's a bit of, it's a lot of feel goods. You know, we're in the time right now where the more feel goods and things that you can put out there that drives humor and makes people laugh and puts a smile on their face and whatever, you know, those are things that I feel like drive a lot of how people engage in the future. You know, they may not engage immediately, or it might not feel like, you know, I'm putting this out there and it's funny and it's the right now. It may not gain a follower, it may not gain a like or whatever, but that type of stuff, I think the more you do and the more you put out there, I feel like you get more good back. It's just one of those things that's just, you're contributing to the goodness and the fun of our.
I think contributing to the goodness and the fun is another thing like people aren't talking about because they're so concerned, especially when, you know, we were talking about this way before COVID. We were talking about, you know, DMO relevancy and DMOs getting defunded or closing down completely. And then we got in the pandemic, and that's even worse, where staff was cut, you know, things were happening from that standpoint. But to be relevant for your community really means being relevant to your audience. And I think a lot of people that, you know, kind of went out there and marketed, it has to be overly worked, overly approved. You know, I think we're just, I mean, I love the fact that it's incredibly sad and compressed that this brought about a change that was sorely needed for at least the last 2 decades.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, authenticity has been a hot topic for the last several years because social media, you know, it felt so autopilot and so, you know, strategized upon, that, people didn't, it felt like it was just a push and not a pull. It was just always a push kind of scenario. And then authenticity played a huge role in our conversations for, a good chunk of the last 5 to 7 years. And then you get to, within the last few years, and then you get into COVID, and then you have to be really strategic about not being so strategic about and how much you really dwell and think about what you're putting out there, so that it does feel like it's a two-way conversation at all times. It's a flowing, free conversation with your audience. And does not feel like it's a marketing ploy, or it's a platform for your marketing efforts.
Yeah, I like that. I like those words, marketing ploy or platform, because you have a lot of destinations and hospitality businesses who have this 5-year strategic plan. And what should they do with that now?
If they still have it printed, they could recycle it, I guess. Even before COVID, though, let's take pandemic.
Yes. That's what no one wants to talk about. It's even before COVID. How bad was this change needed?
You cannot say 5 years from now, this is going to make sense for my destination or for my audience, or for, it might feel like, so here, when I think about a strategic plan, and I think just collectively when we're thinking about planning, I think you want to think about those things in the plan that you don't want to ever leave your radar within the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, these are things that I know I've got to have a plan around, at least for the next 5 years. Now, what those things are within those plans have to be fluid. Like when we're planning annually before COVID, now we're planning quarterly. And I think a lot of DMOs.
And that is a stretch, don't you think?
It's a stretch, because within that quarter, you're going, okay, well, from week to week here and month to month here. And it is a constant conversation. And you still have so many people in the industry pushing, like, 3-year strategy, 5-year strategy, post-COVID strategy. Oh my God, why are we talking about a strategy that's 3 years from now today? That makes no sense. If we can decide how we need to be planning consistently for the next 3 years, let's start there, so we don't lose track of what social means for our destination, or what, advertising means, or and even from a budget perspective, that's fine. That makes sense. But I can guarantee that within the next year or so, even your budgets are going to change, as there's so much that's going to change. And that definitely, the spinning of wheels in how you're planning and how you're thinking that far ahead, and knowing that that's going to change, that does not help our mental capacity.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me, honestly, not even the planning too, but what's crazy to me is what really came to a head is things that, you and I have had conversations about a lot. But I think what's come to a head is like opening up the kimono, and what is it that we've been holding on to for decades that has never really worked, that we look at and maybe think it works in these, research history reports, but how is this not tapping into the now? I think what's interesting about all that is really just like sloughing off all this extra and all this inflated cost. And, no one wants to talk about that, because they want to like hire an agency or do a whatever and then set it and forget it. And they want a nice, easy tourism industry life. And I don't think that's ever going to change. We should be hungry and innovators. And I think this has caused us really to go to a place where we may not have been comfortable, but it's really calls our higher self.
Yeah. I think if you're in tourism today, you're not in a comfort zone, not in a set it and forget it mode. And if you are, you're not going to be in tourism for very long.
Yeah.
Or if you were very comfortable in your, in your plan and in your approach prior to 2020, you now have to be okay with a fly by the seat of your pants approach in most cases, at least, for the next year or so, where you have to constantly be thinking, the now and the next, not the future, not 3 years from now. And if you just have to be comfortable there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a different job. It's a different day for anyone in tourism today than it was, a year plus ago.
It is. So what are the characteristics? What are the pieces that people have from a just an overall skill set standpoint that we're really going to withstand this and, create the new future of hospitality marketing?
Oh, a pivoter. Can you be a professional pivoter?
What do we call it? We call it hyper responsive. Like you don't know what's coming, but once it comes, you can, move around easily.
Your typical planner, your meeting planner, your event planner, your strategic planner, your just planner in general. I'm that part. I'm a planner persona. I like to have a roadmap, at least know what I need to be thinking about for a certain period of time. And then when I get to that time, then I can get into the details, but I at least have to have that on the radar.
Yeah.
Those people are, I think, going to continue. They're accustomed to pivoting and planning the plan Bs and the plan Cs. Those types of planners are, they're okay. They're going to be in good shape. I think that people like who don't have that planner mindset, who can't think tomorrow and next year at the same time, so be able to wait how those two things marry or talk to each other in some way. I think those are the people that are going to have a tough time and are having a tough time.
Yeah.
It's everyone's having to reshuffle how they think about things and what tools they use from their toolbox to make sense of what they need to get done and how it gets done. So it's just a wonky time. It's really hard to put a title on your job these days. Like, it's really hard to say, this is my lane, because no one has their own lane anymore. Everyone's in everyone else's lane. You're crossing over, whether to help or just because it just, without even meaning to, or just gotta do multiple people's jobs, to get the same amount done. And so and I think those people who are, so here's another thing that I'm over.
I was just about to get to, what are we over?
Not my job people, or that's not my role people. Because we don't have roles any longer. There's no titles and descriptions for our job. If you're in travel and tourism, whether it's a hospitality hotelier, a DMO person, you work for airlines, whatever, even if you own an Airbnb and you're just renting out your Airbnb, you do not have a description that is set it in, that's what I do.
But isn't that the future of our workforce? Not even tourism perspective, right? Isn't that just kind of the future of where we are?
It feels like it should be. It feels like we should already be there, but it's still so funny to hear and see, because we see it. It's just so funny to see that still be a thing.
The not my job people, absolutely. I'm so over that. Another thing I'm over that's leaking in from not even 2020, but like coming back from like 2015, is I'm so over this programmatic, right? This programmatic, creepy kind of personalization versus like put your work into it. Mm-hmm. I think that's being like missold. I think DMOs are like jumping onto that, and not that programmatic is bad, but it's really the strategy behind it.
Yeah, you could over program programmatic, and it feels like that. I mean, it feels like because on the other end of, when you're a marketer and you're also a person, you see it from both sides, right? You're like, you see what goes out and what's programmed, and you're like, okay, well, I think this is going to make sense. And then you see it from let me put my hat on as just a person who travels sometimes on occasion. And you look at it, you're like, that feels off. Like, it feels a little too programmed for me. Like it does not, again, does not feel authentic.
Mhm.
This is the scary part of advertising with the the destinations and hotels and brands in general who have a lot of money to spend,
Yeah.
um, but don't have that middle ground of someone to really, or a team of people to really kind of massage how that money is spent. So a lot of it is put into platforms that automate a lot of things. So it feels like you've got all these campaigns are running and it's very personalized, it's very segmented. You got your retargeting set up, you got your lookalikes, you got all these various
Mhm.
lanes running, but all the lanes feel like robots are running down the lane talking to you. Like, here's, instead of actual, real, authentic messages, so it just, that's going to be, I think, something that we're going to have to deal with. And it's a scary part of advertising. It just is, because those platforms are not going to go away. They're going to increase. And as bigger brands have more money to spend and less time they want to spend in the nitty gritty, it's just going to keep happening,
Because it takes so much time. And the thing that one talks about is these platforms have to make these dials, these pieces available to you. But as a marketer, as an advertiser, it's your ethical decision on how you use that. And I know a lot of people have seen, the social media documentary on Netflix, and a lot of people are trying to cut off or do whatever once they figure out what kind of data they get about you. But it comes down really to the advertiser's ethical decisions on how they do that, where you serve your audience versus, push your audience down this antiquated funnel until you hammer them to buy.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I feel like we've just been ranting.
Isn't that what our channel's about, though? Aren't we just ranting?
So every week, join us for the weekly rant on what we're so over. No, there. I mean, there's just these. What I like about kicking this show up and doing this on a weekly basis is that these are conversations that we have on a daily basis. Okay, so here's a rundown. 10 a.m. Man, I just saw this, whatever, and I think we should either think about it or we should do a little more digging. Okay, sounds great. 11 a.m. Man, I'm so over this. Here's what's happening over here, and let's pivot over here. And 2 p.m. is so we have these conversations on the daily.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels good to have like a weekly montage of and recap a lot of those.
It does. It does. But I think, like I said, I think a lot of people are thinking this, and I just want to say it, especially again, when you come back to in the travel industry, you come back to the DMOs and those who are government, oriented. I think it's important. One of the things I'm over really is when you get new commissioners in or a new board in, and you take it like you're down the cycle versus leading. I think these small, especially these smaller DMOs, it's their job to educate these new people and guide them down what is actually working for the destination versus like, listening to a commissioner who doesn't like Facebook, for instance, because it may be too political or he's got a different affiliation. It doesn't matter the personal preferences. That is what I'm over. All these personal preferences in the travel industry need to just go out the damn window, because the preferences, right? The preferences that matter are your audience, is your community. And your community is not just your residents. Your community are those who come and embrace your place and embrace that and leave tax dollars behind. Like that are the only people that damn matter, not someone's opinion who may not be familiar with digital marketing and only likes the color blue. I mean, that is like so 1995.
Right. Right. Well, as a marketer, you will put out things in your career that you didn't 100% agree with, whether it be creatively, visually, messaging wise. Not everything is going to make sense and appeal to you and
Yeah.
your person. And so It's about the data. It's about finding who we're talking to and understanding who you're talking to and developing a strategy that makes sense for them. And it's not always going to go back to something that you love. It's not always going to mean that, and just be okay with that.
I think that's the big thing. But you said something there that I want to wrap up with too, which is talking about the data. So there's lots of different kinds of data in our industry right now, and we're not really also talking about that. I mean, there's data that's a history report, which is literally going to tell you what about tomorrow. This comes back to our predictions, and no one really knows what's going on. What does that data really tell you, and what kind of weight do you give to that data?
Yeah, because our KPIs are changing. I mean, they're reshuffling. Some of your less priority, data points last year are now becoming your more priority data points. I think it's just about, everybody's different. You cannot base your strategy, just like you can't base your strategy and your audiences off your neighbor or off a brand or destination. You have to adjust your KPIs for what makes sense for you. And what makes sense for your, you have your set of decision makers, whether that's your council or whether that's your, your city managers or whatever that might be. You have your decision makers, and then they've got their set of pain points and things that they like to watch that make sense to them, because those guys are not always marketers either. So they don't really truly know what they should be watching. So it's an ebb and flow. And then you've also got the industry who's changing the KPIs for us. It's not always going to be what we think makes sense. They're going to, those ones that dominate are going to, they're going to make those decisions for us. And so the data points, I mean, it's a constant watch and a measure to understand, just as a starting point, what data points should I be monitoring? And then you have to get to that next step of making sure you're using all the tools that are actually reporting on those metrics. And so it's just analytics and data. I mean, we tend to, not pick apart data to, an inch of our lives, because it gets down to such a detailed metric that then it becomes overwhelming to even make sense of and make a decision from.
And a lot of those data points aren't germane to like just societal pieces, right? So they may tell you what people are thinking, but they don't really tell you what people are feeling. And that's a huge portion, even though travel is a very feeling industry. I think that's something that people don't want to talk about, is it's more about the emotions and the feeling in our industry than it is the thinking in our industry.
Yeah, we're all making efforts and decisions based off of our emotions. It's the mood. Hashtag mood. Or hashtag, what was the other one we talked about? Hashtag vibe.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole different situation. And I think, people who've embraced change are doing well, but what no one's talking about is the fact that, this whole situation has forced us into this risk mentality that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. But I think that's the talent of tomorrow. The talent of tomorrow are people who are like, hell yeah, let's take this risk on. Here's 5 ways we can do this. And the decisions may be really quick and very gut feeling because the data is not there to support it. But you throw 5 ideas against the wall and quickly, and one of them hits, where it takes somebody else, 30 days to come up with just one decision.
Right. Yeah. Remember that movie with Ben Affleck where he was, was it Ben Affleck? It was Ben Stiller. Remember where he was a risk analyzer? Along Came
Polly.
You can't put things in your risk assessment, like what's the risk on this decision or whatever. You kind of have to make decisions based on where you think is next best decision. And then when you get to that next decision, you got to make the next. Sometimes you just can't overanalyze everything. But there are some key data points that industry's putting out, watch those, follow those. They're always changing. But there are some of those more stagnant KPIs that, we've all got to know and understand. that aren't going to ever fall off of our radars, but there are some that are just, you got to kind of ride that wave for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think, again, we go back to the whole theme of our episode. This episode is no one knows. No one knows.
It's not even the data.
Say the word, but no one knows,
knows. No one knows. No one's experts right now. There is no one that's, popped out of a time machine who said, oh, I did 2020 and 2021 10 years ago. I could tell you what's going to happen. No one has
popped out of a couple of those videos, but I don't think that's, we may have to put our tinfoil hats on for those though.
So we are, get comfortable being okay with taking some risk, get comfortable, and don't overanalyze everything. And don't, if someone's trying to make a prediction, don't watch it. Don't take it with a grain of salt. I would love if a group of legitimate futurists / crystal ball readers / psychics came out of the woodwork and said, we can legitimately tell you collectively this is what's going to happen in 3 years. Yeah. That'd be great. But we don't have that. So we just gotta, again, ride that wave and just, get comfortable.
I think so too. So I think the real winners, again, that no one's talking about are the risk takers. I mean, again, that's antithetical a lot in our industry, a lot.
I know.
From hospitality to DMOs to airlines.
Some are taking more risk, and it's good to see those that are doing more. And I think it definitely boils down to people are getting comfortable. They're getting comfortable in where we are as an industry and what it's all about our market, where the leisure and meetings market is right now and what they want to see come out of those that they're getting these messages from. We got to stay positive. We got to stay fun. Everyone's trying to plan, If you don't have travel coming up, you're at least planning to get travel back on your radar in some way. So that's why Pinterest and Instagram have really blown up in terms of the planning of travel. But we as an industry also need to be in that mindset. We need to find that positive something to look forward to. And it can't be a prediction that we think is going to happen. It needs to be that area of comfort where we just need to be okay knowing that we've got to ride the wave and stay ahead as much as we can of that curve over the next year or so, and keep ourselves in that positive mindset.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is being in that positive mindset and having an appetite for risk is really big. And I think that's going to continue to be rewarding. And I think one thing, again, no one talks about is the value of failing at something. Like, if you aren't failing at some of your marketing campaigns, you are not trying hard enough. And everyone's like, it's got to be better than last month, and the next month has to be better than that, and this campaign has to do better than that. But if you're not failing, you're not doing the right market testing, in my opinion.
Right. And forget benchmarking right now.
Yeah.
No bench. The bench has disappeared. You're just sort of trying to gain a little bit of intel over each month to try to rebuild a bench.
Mm-hmm.
But you're, a lot of it's just that there's no normal. So trying to go back to some things that we were thinking about right now, it doesn't make sense. So
it doesn't. And I think that's really the wrap up of what we're talking about. We're so over the over planning
and predictions.
And side note, we're so over these LinkedIn salespeople.
Or wait, can I just finish off by saying that because I'm getting them in my email too, but those that are angry that their first really terrible 5 sales efforts didn't pay off and they haven't gotten a response. So you get the angry email that's
I'm gonna take you off my list.
I guess you don't want to talk to me. No, I don't want to talk to you or hear.
I know. It's getting like creepy stalker boys. It really is. And it's just kind of like, bye.
Tough time for sales, right? It's a tough time to sell people, but a lot of people right now don't want to be sold. We're just trying to keep, this is water, head above water. And you got like salespeople flying in, you know, with all of these promises, and I could do this, and we could fill the funnel, and we could do, you know, it's just no. I don't trust anyone who can make a promise right now.
I totally agree. I totally agree. But I think that's, again, coming out of that year, people are desperate. People are like trying to keep their jobs. And I feel for so many people losing their jobs, but it's about relationships. And so it really comes down to about relationships with each other. It comes down to relationships with sales. I mean, whatever your capacity is in the industry or outside of the industry, it's going to come down to how we help each other and how we unite to come out of this, but not copy. Copying is done. Best practices are done.
Yeah. I know. Who still says best practices too?
Like everyone except for us. That's a 4-letter word in our place.
Practice. I mean, you can have the better practices. Can we change that game?
That's such an overword, and that proprietary and oh, give me a break. So over that shit.
You know, there should be, so I think what we should do is come up with a list of words that are irrelevant at this point, like best practices. That's a phrase more than a word, but like the word model, like there's no model.
Disrupt
is broken. Yes. So
disrupt is such a tech boy, you know what word? I can't. But yeah,
yeah. Though there are just certain there are certain words that should steer you away, that we should develop that list.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. All right, cool. So I think we've ranted enough for our first episode, right? On all the things we are so over and the travel industry needs to hear. And congrats to a lot of you who are already doing this. We're watching, we're following, we're cheering you on. And those who haven't heard this yet, like just rip off the band-aid and push yourself forward. And we'd love to hear your stories, maybe have you on. Let's rant about it together.
Ranting. #mood.
Love it.